Hey everybody, my name is Hugo Bernier. I am the world's laziest developer. And today what I want to talk to you is I'm not going to show you code. I'm going to talk to you about an idea. So the idea is something that we'll build together over the next 10 or so sessions. And it will end up, hopefully, if all goes well, it will end up being something that goes on to be an open source initiative that will be maintained for the many years to come. So let's start with the foundation, right? The Microsoft 365 community has lots of really cool samples for web parts, team applications, or Teams applications, active card extensions, and they always come with a disclaimer, which is this is for education purposes only. It's not really intended to be used as is. You can, there's nothing stopping you from using it as is, but that's never really the intent, right? We don't want them to be production solutions. In fact, we don't even distribute the packaged web part samples because we want you to open them up, look at the code, and learn from it. But what if we did create a ready-to-use web part? And what if we did, for example, like the PnP Modern Search web part, right? Which is something that is built by the community. Casper always updates us on these calls. But what if we build something like the PnP Modern Search web part that was a web part that people can use? And what if we did that together? Now, we'd like to do this as something that we could use to demonstrate best practices in web part design, functionality, configuration, and application lifecycle. But like the PnP Modern Search, it would also be extensible and welcome community contributions, especially if you think about the layout library that Casper just talked about. And what better web part could we build than a web part builder? Something maybe that's inspired by the SharePoint card designer. And the SharePoint card designer, it's great, but let's face it, it's not as flexible as what we'd like it to be. And what if we could make it easy for people to build secure web parts without writing code? And we're not talking about vibe coding yet. We're just talking about building from samples and things. And what if we allowed people to pick from a large collection of samples? In fact, let's go back and take a look at in the SharePoint experience, right? We have list formatting and list templates. And when you go to create a list, it actually offers you some really cool template, right? And it allows you to import from different things. But if you look, there's also a series of Microsoft templates. And then you have templates from your organization. Well, what if we did something like this for your web part builder that added maybe another tab, which was from the community? In the case of list templates, we happen to have beautiful. There you go. Thank you. Is that my Pokemon sound?
But better late than never, but that's all for you and Lucas.
Awesome. So we already have a beautiful repository of list formatting samples and lists. Hopefully we could turn this into list templates and things like that. So imagine if we had the Microsoft list creation experience pulling templates from that. Now, this is something that I was bugging the list team when I was working at Microsoft. Nothing ever happened from that. But we can actually build something ourselves that will work from a web part perspective, not from a list perspective. And the idea is based on something that I built a long time ago, which is an adaptive card web part. And I built this. Let's just take a look here. I built this in 2020. So obviously, there's an opportunity for us to update this web part, and there's an opportunity to add functionality. Since then, there's been lots of updates to the adaptive card framework. There's even been a cool control that's been added to the PNP reusable controls that we'll talk about. But let's start with a demo. All right. Let's see if we can make this happen. So first of all, if you don't know what an adaptive card is a JSON schema that you could use to build things where you separate the presentation from the data. And it doesn't use code unless you consider JSON code. And it's something that allows you to build something that will adapt, hence the name. It will adapt to the environment in which it resides. So if you go here to this really cool designer, and you'll notice, by the way, there's a brand new adaptive card designer. I'll show you that in a minute. But here I can actually just completely change what the card looks like by following a schema that's predefined. I can change the data, and then I can just show the data in different formats. So within Teams is what I meant to select, within Viva Connections, and so on and so forth. So the idea here is we're separating the presentation from the data, and we make it adapt in the environment in which it resides. And in fact, it is theme aware as well, although I guess I need to pick an environment that supports themes. And so that's the idea. Now, Microsoft has updated recently the adaptive card framework. And this is one of the changes that we would need to do is we need to adapt the adaptive cards. But let's go take a look at that part that I'm talking about here. And because I need some cool samples to show you here. All right, so this is the web part that I created. And this is the web part that we will be updating and configuring in the future. So the first thing that you do is you can see that I can either pick from JSON that I'm going to copy and paste, or by a URL where the JSON is stored. Just for fun, I will take a sample here. I'll update the template JSON, and I will paste it. And if everything goes well, cool. I just picked a calendar. That's not at all the sample I wanted to show you. But let's just pick another one here. There you go. We'll take this one. And cool, right? So now the cool thing about this is if we had a web part that allowed us to enter adaptive card data, we could actually allow people to build web parts that maybe, like for example, this is a web part I've had to build in the past, and a cafeteria menu web part for a large university. Imagine if we didn't have to build the web part. Imagine if I could just copy and paste either from a list of templates or, well, use a secret tool. Now, adaptive cards also use adaptive card templating, which is you could hard code all the data in your JSON here, or you could actually use a data source. And in the sample that I built, I allow you to either provide a JSON, select a list where the data will come from, or get data from a URL. And that URL could be an API, for example, an open API or something like that. So let's actually move on here because I don't want to run out of time. But, and these are examples here of other examples that I copied and pasted. In the SPFx, the PNP SPFx controls React library, we actually have a series of controls. And one of these cool controls is the adaptive card host. So the code that I built 5 years ago, right? That can kind of we can throw that code away. We can start leveraging the most up-to-date version of this code. And the cool thing about this code is that it is adaptive to themes and high contrast and things like that. However, there are new things that have been introduced in the adaptive card schema, so we'd have to include that as well. Now, let's go back to here and talk about the idea, because today, again, we're focusing on the idea. Now, what if on top of what we've shown you, with the idea of templating, the idea of copying and pasting or creating adaptive card schema, what if I could do something that I showed you the last call that I was on, where we were able to build a mermaid diagram web part, which allows you to actually chat with AI to say, hey, AI, I need you to build this for me. And it would generate the content. In this case, it's a mermaid diagram, but imagine this would be an adaptive card, and it would show you a preview right away from here. So our goals here would be to do the following. First, we'd want to build a web part that is ready to deploy, just like the PnP search web part. We'd want to make sure that it's secure, that there's nothing that you can post or put in that adaptive card code that would compromise the data or the environment. We would want to make sure that it's easy to customize, either by changing the adaptive card or do other crazy thing like that. And we want to make sure that it's extensible. The PnP search web part is incredibly extensible. That's one of the strengths of it. And that's what we want to do. We want to build a web part that will make it easy for you to extend it. So maybe you need to adapt it to suit your organization's needs. For example, add functionality that you need only for your organization that's not shared by the rest of the world. Also, we'd want to make sure that it is theme aware, obviously, because we're beyond just the single color sites that we used to have. We can have multiple colors in different pages, different environments, and even different sections. And probably most importantly, we'd want to make it look and feel like an out-of-the-box web part. But let's talk about the functionality, right? So we've already talked about we want to add pick from a template. We'll want AI assisted creation. And one of the fancy things that we'll want to do from that is also allow you to upload an image or draw an image and say, hey, can you create an adaptive card from this for me? Again, we'll make it theme aware, data connected. But data connected here, we want to extend the types of data that we wanted to be able to pick from. We'll want to support custom actions so that I can actually submit the results of a form, maybe, or things like that. There's another concept that we'll want to introduce, which is the concept of dynamic data, right? In dynamic data, you can have one or more web parts that are connected together and they feed data from each other. So for example, the upcoming events list here is dynamically connected to the event detail web part. So when I select a different event from the list, I can actually feed that data to the event detail. We also want to, so we've added dynamic data aware. There's another thing we want to do. When you search for content in SharePoint, right, you expect, or when you see content on a page in SharePoint, you expect to be able to search it. The problem is most people, when they create a custom web part that has content, they usually forget that that content might need to be searchable. There is functionality that's built into SPFx web parts that allows you to specify metadata values for your properties. And those metadata values could be things like, hey, this is searchable. So when I create content on my web part or I set an attribute on my web part, I want it to show up in search results. It can also select it to be a HTML string, in which case it is searchable, but it will even fix the hyperlinks if you move images or documents around, and it will strip out the unsafe HTML. There's other things like image sources and links and things like that, but one of the things that we want to do here in our fancy web part is to make it so that if you create adaptive card content that it is potentially searchable by users. So property metadata. And then one last little thing, we want because we can't predict how our users are going to use that fancy web part creator. We want the web part to support something called full bleed, right? Or full width experience. And so by doing that, we would allow people to put that web part in the upper section of a page. So let's add that to our things. And then finally, we don't just want to support full bleed layout, but we also want to be Teams aware and work with every environment in which web parts can be hosted. So what does this timeline look like? What we're over the next 10 or so sessions, we'll be doing the following. We'll introduce the adaptive card web part or the web part creator web part. We will show you how to create a custom property pane that suits our needs. And then we'll introduce the AI-powered layout creation. We'll add multimodality, which is the ability, again, to work in different modes, specifically for image creation, image-based creation. And then we'll add UI theme awareness. We'll add full bleed rendering for flexibility, indexable content, data connectivity, and then we'll introduce, and by this time we should have had enough time to actually build a repository to have our sample galleries of templates. We'll have a user experience to pick from our templates. And finally, we will focus on increasing the extensibility to make it possible for people to add whatever crazy functionality they want. So that's it for me. We have more coming up in the next several sessions. But if you want to read more about the topics I've discussed today, you can find on the slide, and I believe Dave has already shared all the URLs in the chat. That's it for me. Back to you, Chris.